They've got to say goodbye to the most challenging, the most remarkable and the most beautiful passenger plane ever built. Nose down, wings drooping, she almost looks sad herself as she appears on the stage for one last time. But then that familiar roar of defiance and pride for this last performance from the Queen of the Skies. That extraordinary shape that's made her the most famous plane in the world. There's something about it that words can't describe. Her most ardent fans gathered to say goodbye.
It's just something special. Nothing else compares to it.
I feel very sad to see her go. I also feel very privileged that I've had the honour of actually flying on it twice. And that will stick in my mind forevermore. I actually proposed to my wife on Concorde.
She flies. Concorde flies at last.
It's nearly 35 years since Concorde first flew, even if it took another 8 years before services began. Since then, it's set many milestones. British Concordes have made almost 50,000 flights. They've flown 140 million miles. That's 300 return trips to the moon. They've carried more than 2.5 million passengers who've drunk more than 500,000 bottles of champagne. Checking in for the last flight from Heathrow, John Cochrane, test pilot on the very first British flight. Proving Concorde was safe was a huge part of his life.
That's the saddest part, that while you still have an icon of British civil aviation flying, and it's still ahead of the game as far as its technical achievements are concerned, and it has no competitors. It's something this nation has got to be rightly proud of, and yet we're going to terminate it before we have to.
A technological triumph of the 60s, it became a commercial nightmare in the 70s. The original plan was to build 300 planes, but the 1970s oil crisis made her too expensive to fly. There were huge complaints about the noise. At many airports, Concorde was banned. In the end, only 20 were ever built. And then the Paris crash, the terrorist attacks of 9/11, and an aviation slump. Concorde is no longer profitable to fly. So this afternoon, the red carpet for the retirement of the most royal of planes. For millions, the majesty of Concorde will be much missed. And by this evening, there'll be 5 Concordes lined up here with all the passengers off those final flights, the VIPs and the celebrities, for one final farewell party with plenty more of the champagne that's always characterised Concorde, and no doubt a few damp eyes as well.
Simon, we'll see an amazing show this afternoon for what some say, though, is a premature end for Concorde.
Well, it is, Darren, because there had always been hopes that Concorde would fly for another 10 or even 15 years. Don't forget, British Airways spent millions of pounds refitting Concorde after that Paris crash. But then, with the terrorist attacks of 9/11 back in 2001, the huge downturn in aviation, the transatlantic passengers simply disappeared. Concorde wasn't profitable anymore. British Airways was going to have to spend millions more on other extra safety techniques and safety materials, and they eventually decided there was no more money in Concorde. There wouldn't ever be, and Concorde's day had finally come.
All right, Simon, thank you. And there's live coverage of Concorde's last commercial flight as it lands at Heathrow on BBC Two and BBC News 24 from 3:30 this afternoon. And we'll have more on the end of the era of supersonic flight later in the programme.